Welcome everyone to our Accelerating Water Stewardship webinar today. My name is Matt Howard. I'm Vice President of Water Stewardship at the Water Council, and it's great to have you join us here today on Earth Day, actually, to run through this webinar on water stewardship. As we know, this planet is unique in this solar system because of our water resources. And so from the perspective of an organization that uses or impacts water resources, it really does pay to do the assessment, to do the deeper dive and understanding of what water means to your organization and the value that it ultimately brings to your operations. And so we'll get into some of that today, of course, focusing on our program here at the Water Council called WAVE. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are going to save some time at the end, hopefully about 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So as the webinar progresses, feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A box function at the bottom of the screen here in Zoom. And then again, we'll turn to those questions kind of collectively towards the end of the webinar. The other thing which is important, obviously, are my co-panelists. So let me do a brief introduction here of our co-panelists. I'll run through the agenda and then we'll jump right into the webinar. Joining me first off is Patrick Boyle. Patrick is the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety and Sustainability for Samuel Son and Company. He's responsible for developing and executing their sustainability strategy, as well as managing their occupational safety, environmental compliance programs. Patrick has more than 25 years of experience in this sector in the health, safety, and sustainability fields, and he's worked in insurance, mining, and heavy manufacturing industries. So thanks, Patrick, for being here today with us. Wrapping things up for us here today on the webinar is going to be Lauren Enright. She's the program manager for water services at SCS Global Services. She leads their growing water stewardship practice at SCS, where she works with organizations on validation, verification, and certification of water metrics. She really understands where the value lies in going beyond measuring and monitoring water metrics. And she's been working across all different kinds of issues over the past few years, from water risk assessments for utilities to water supply and climate adaptation measures in the ski industry, to wastewater and sewage inspections data related to our aging infrastructure here in the US. So Lauren bringing that whole range of experience to the table today for our conversation. So thanks to both of you for being here, and Stacy Vogel-Davis, who's our comms director here at the Water Council, will be monitoring us, making sure we're all technically sound and this webinar is moving smoothly. So thanks, Stacy, for your help. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm going to cover the WAVE program, the outlines of the WAVE program and the framework. I'm going to turn it over to Patrick. He's going to do a deeper dive from the perspective of a WAVE participating organization and just relay some of their experience to date in implementing the program. And then Lauren is going to wrap things up for us, covering the importance of independent verification. That's really one of the key features of this program, is that verification piece. So with that, let's jump to the next slide. So for those of you that may not be too familiar with the Water Council, we are a nonprofit headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, dedicated to addressing the world's water quality and quantity challenges. We've been doing this now for just over 15 years, and we've developed two basic approaches or platforms that help us achieve our mission. The first is really focused around innovation and technology. I'm not going to spend much, if any, time today talking about those programs, but you can find information on those programs online on our website. And it's really about getting those solutions out into the marketplace to address those quality or quantity challenges that companies, that utilities, and others face. And that's our innovation and technology platform. I, of course, lead our water stewardship platform. One of the things that contributes to our impact as an organization is the fact that we're very intentional about connecting our water stewardship programs with our innovation and technology programs. So our water stewardship ends, then we like to pull in some of the innovation and technology piece to keep those positive outcomes flowing in terms of impact on water quality and quantity through the use of appropriate technologies. We're member-based. We have over 140 members. A majority of those members are based in North America, but we have really great representation in Europe and Asia and elsewhere. And so because of that, we do serve a global audience. So our partners, our clients, and other organizations that we work with are all over the planet. And so we're really bringing that expertise, those best practices from innovation, technology, and stewardship to the table to really address needs and demands that our water using clients have. Next slide. So we really started our experience in the water stewardship world here at the Water Council through our work early on, about 10 years or so ago, with the Alliance for Water Stewardship, helping to set up that organization, establish that standard, and administer that system specifically with oversight in North America. And it was through that work that we really began to better understand and make the business case for water stewardship here in North America. And that experience was really focused a lot around the site level or facility level application of water stewardship. And it was from that experience that we really saw a need for the WAVE program, which I'm going to talk about in a second, to really give entities, organizations that enterprise or corporate-wide view of water stewardship risk, so that they could then turn around and focus their efforts at specific sites or facilities. So I'll talk about that in a minute, but we spent a lot of time working with everybody from data centers to dairies on water stewardship issues. And again, we really kind of rolled that experience into our approach with our WAVE program. Next slide. So just in terms of our water stewardship platform, I mentioned, one of the two key programmatic areas for the Water Council. We do offer advisory services. It's more at the strategic kind of risk assessment level. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me directly afterwards, and we can talk about some of the customized, tailored approaches that we offer to organizations. We also offer capacity building and training. The previous slide mentioned we created the credentialing program for water stewardship with the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard. We also offer customized and tailored training approaches for organizations. And then last but not least, and certainly again, the focus here today is going to be on our WAVE Water Stewardship Verified program. Next slide. So why WAVE? Why water stewardship? Why talk about water on Earth Day? These two graphics hopefully illustrate the point in terms of the challenges that we're currently facing. And this is just a snapshot of what's happening right now with water stress in North America. The picture is certainly the same and in fact worse in certain instances globally. Looking at the left-hand side, we're looking at a snapshot from WRI Aqueduct Water Risk Atlas. And light areas are low risk, dark areas are high risk. You can see on the left-hand side when filtering or searching on water stress in North America, you can see obviously a lot of water stress and a lot of water stress in areas that we kind of expected. So California, Arizona, certainly central Mexico. But looking up into the central portion of the US, up into the prairie and plains provinces of Canada, in and around the Great Lakes, and then even over into the southeastern coast of the United States, lots of red. And so one of the takeaways here is water stress is not just a water quantity issue. A lot of the stress that we're facing, for instance, here in the Great Lakes region is around water quality. So really important then when it comes to engaging in water stewardship that risk radar has been expanded beyond just looking at scarcity. And if we look at the right-hand side in future 2030 projections, unfortunately, the picture is not getting better. And you can see a lot of more dense, high-risk, high-stressed regions in the United States. That central portion of the US, the Ogallala Aquifer, is being depleted, and that supports, of course, a lot of the agricultural commodity production in the United States and globally. That's a major risk area. And then again, around into the Great Lakes, where we have an abundance of fresh water reserves, but serious water quality challenges. So no matter where you're operating as an organization, even if you're not in Phoenix or an obviously water scarce region, that doesn't mean that your organization is immune from water risks. And so that's one of the things that we want to help accomplish today through the overview of our WAVE program is that you can do that risk assessment and find those risk areas that may not be so obvious from your stance at headquarters or wherever your facilities are. Next slide, please. So kind of going back to some of that early work that we did on water stewardship, helping companies develop a more strategic approach to water stewardship, but really accounting for the complexity of the organization. So whether you have one site, a handful of sites, or 1,000 facilities, how do you help an organization really assess risk across such a complex entity? And so we really felt the time was opportune and there was a gap in the marketplace to better define, recognize, and reward good enterprise-wide water stewardship. So that's why we developed the WAVE program. And you can see here in these bulleted points, essentially the 5 steps for the WAVE program. We've actually updated this program annually since its launch in 2022, and we've just recently released at the end of last week our latest iteration of WAVE 1.2. So all of these steps that we were walking through here continue to be refined on an annual basis to reflect how this program has been used in the real world. So I think that's a really important thing, that we are doing continuous improvement on the program itself as we're learning about how it operates. So these 5 steps seem to be working for our organizations. Patrick is going to tell us a little bit more about their experience in a minute. But it's pretty straightforward. Understand your water uses and impacts, so build that operational water use profile. Assess watershed-based risks where you operate. And if that also includes material risks and material water uses in your supply chain or value chain, WAVE is flexible enough to pull that into the assessment framework. And then based on that profile that you've just built, then prioritize your sites, your facilities for action. What's driving risk at those facilities? And are there potentially even corporate or enterprise-wide practice or process improvements that you might want to implement to better your understanding of how you're using water, or just really take your operations to the next level in terms of water outcomes? So understand, assess, prioritize, and then based on the steps up to number 4 there, kind of draw that line from that contextual water use, that water profile, into developing a water policy or commitment statement. So yes, it needs to be aspirational, but it also needs to be based in the reality of how your organization is using and impacting water resources, and then what that means for you in terms of going forward to not only mitigate risk and impact, but also to address shared challenges and opportunities. So create that contextual policy or commitment statement. And then the last step in the program is to simply communicate externally to your stakeholders, to investors, customers, and others that you've gone through this program, that you've learned something about your operations in terms of that water use or impact, and then ultimately what you plan to do about it. What are your next steps moving forward as a water steward, as an organization? And so it's really those 5 steps then that SCS will be assessing for conformity. And so you really walk away then from this process with a roadmap for action, and your stakeholders walk away with credibility and assurance that you're going to be building targets and taking next steps that directly address how water is material and presents risk for your operations. Next slide. So I mentioned that WAVE really filled a gap within the marketplace, and this is just a really kind of small snapshot of the different organizations and tools and frameworks that are out there. This is by no means comprehensive, just illustrative, but a pretty typical journey for companies is some level of senior commitment to water stewardship, right? And whether that's more formal in something like the CEO water mandate or simply a statement made in a sustainability report, how do you make that senior level ambition real? How do you operationalize that? Well, that's really where WAVE comes in. It really takes that ambition and operationalizes water stewardship from the boardroom to the shop floor. And so then when you move into the phase then of actually implementing a water stewardship project at a high risk site, no matter which tool or standard or whatever that you use at that point, you now have confidence through WAVE that you're doing the right things at the right times in the right places across your enterprise when it comes to water stewardship. So we really feel it fits well and is very complementary to the existing frameworks that are already out there on water stewardship. Next slide. One of the other things that we hear a lot and really went into the development of this program is that the barriers to entry to water stewardship can be or seem quite high to companies that are now starting to address water for the first time. There's a lot of complexity in terms of the lexicon for water stewardship. There's a lot of tools out there that can be somewhat confusing. And then, of course, there's always the next thing, the next trend in terms of how to set a target and things of that nature. And so companies come to us looking for, kind of that pathway through this very complex approach to being better water stewards. And so we really feel like the 5-step approach that we've developed with WAVE cuts through that complexity, bridges the execution gap, which some of you may have been reading about in terms of moving companies from intention around water to action. And WAVE can really help accomplish that. I talked about right at the beginning the fact that we really need to expand our water risk radar when it comes to water stewardship, and not just focus on areas of water scarcity, but really start looking at water quality issues, getting into reputational and regulatory risk as well. WAVE helps expand that risk radar and not only find potentially like hidden risks within the organization or within the enterprise, but also opportunities on the positive side of the ledger, opportunities to positively contribute to good water outcomes where you're operating. I talked about this idea that WAVE helps operationalize water stewardship, helps make it real, and ensure that you're taking a pragmatic approach in building your water program. And then again, this idea that it's not enough just to say you're doing something on water anymore. Stakeholders, investors, and others really are looking to some sort of validation or verification on those claims that organizations are making. And again, when it comes to our WAVE program, that's why we're working with SCS Global Services on the independent verification piece to really give that added level of assurance to stakeholders on your actions. Next slide. Advance it one more, Stacy, too. There's a logo. There we go. So one of the unique features, again, about this program is that enterprise-wide claim. This is a sample claim. It may or may not exactly look like something that you might potentially earn with your organization. The point here is illustrative to really give you a sense of this enterprise-wide water stewardship claim and how it can be used. And so we're seeing companies right now putting the claim, putting the logo, which just flashed up there on the upper right-hand side, into sustainability reports, onto websites, other materials where you're reaching out to your stakeholders. We're even seeing people use and add this as an addendum to ESG frameworks and questionnaires like CDP. And so again, this idea that the enterprise now has really been assessed for risk is this unique feature, and we built the verification program to appropriately account for that. Again, whether you've got one site or 1,000 sites, this enterprise-wide assessment program and verification really conveys that sort of that corporate level claim that makes WAVE so unique. Next slide, please. So again, just in terms of what we've been hearing from organizations that have been through the program, and we're really seeing a wide diversity now of organizations using this program, from our sort of traditional kind of manufacturing industrial companies to universities. We're having interest now from utilities and service and retail-oriented organizations. So WAVE really is a flexible process-based approach to helping organizations understand water use impact and risk. And so what we're hearing now in terms of feedback from those organizations, and of course in more detail from Patrick here in a minute, is that WAVE truly does provide that roadmap for action. It really does help cut through that complexity and provide that sort of accelerated pathway toward improving water stewardship outcomes. It provides the information and the practices that organizations need to build a strategy upon. That's critically important. Following the materiality of water in your organization to risk, to target setting, to action is so important. And so WAVE really does provide that foundation for action. We're hearing confidence from stakeholders and positive feedback and approval from stakeholders in terms of organizations that are going through this program. And something which I won't be able to spend a whole lot of time on today, but the fact that WAVE really aligns well with external reporting frameworks, whether those are ESG frameworks or other types. But the data, the actions, the outcomes that you'll gather from WAVE really align well with CDP, GRI, and in fact, we've just done a recent assessment of the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and WAVE aligns quite well with E3, which is the water standard within that reporting directive. And we're even hearing our companies now talk about WAVE on earnings calls with investors. So we're really starting to get that evidence of impact now is really starting to come in after 2 years of operating this program. And so we're really excited to continue to grow the program and hopefully to grow it with each of you that are on this webinar today. So have the confidence to do the right things at the right times in the right places when it comes to your organization and water stewardship with WAVE. Next slide, please. So you can just see here in terms of the next slide, Stacy. Just a quick snapshot of some of the organizations right now that are in the program. Again, we've got all this stuff online at waveverified.com, and we'll be following back up with each of you after this webinar. We are also recording this, and we'll be sharing a copy of that recording that you can share internally in your organization. And so with that, now I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to run through their experience using the WAVE program. Patrick, over to you.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thanks, Matt. First off, happy Earth Day to everybody. I'm Patrick Boyle with Samuel, Son and Company. Spend the next 15 minutes or so just kind of going through what we've experienced so far with our experience to WAVE and putting WAVE in place here across our enterprise. So next slide. Kind of give you an idea of who Samuel and Son is. If you're not in the metal industry, you really probably haven't heard of us much. We're a family-owned business, started back in 1855. Long time ago, right? So Mark and Lewis were the founders. Were probably doing work by candlelight because they were doing this before the light bulb was even invented. So it's been around for quite some time. And that business has really grown over the past 160 years. And it's now one of the largest metal processing businesses in North America. Next slide. This next slide here will kind of show you where we're located at. So we've got a pretty heavy footprint in North America, Canada, US, and a growing footprint in Mexico as well. So over 80 facilities across North America, over 5,000 team members as well. So it's a fairly large business. It's been fun to be a part of. And when you look at our product range, it's pretty substantial. We produce everything from the smallest metal parts to the largest metal parts, and I'll kind of go through that here in a little bit as well. So next slide. So one aspect of our business is our service centers. We do everything from handling metal for various customers in the automotive industry, aerospace industries, and even currency. So we work with federal government on currency. You probably have, driven a car, flown a plane that contains our metal, but you probably may also have some of our product in your pocket or your bank back home. The main, services provided by our service center is really cutting, blanking, and basically handling those big rolls of steel you see in the back of a truck. Goes through our businesses as process. It might turn out to be the hood of a car, some internal structural components, or piece of an airplane. But the one thing you're probably picking up on right now is that our processes, our products don't really have water in them, right? We're not a food and beverage operation, but we do realize that we do consume water as part of our processes to produce these products. Now, on the service side of the business, we really don't consume that much water to produce these products. Now, on the other side, our manufacturing group does. So next slide. On the manufacturing side, we produce, probably even a wider variety of products. We have several different business units that are underneath the Samuel umbrella. Our associated tube group, as you can imagine, they produce tubing, right? For furniture, for the auto industry, for engines, and HVAC. Our pressure vessel groups, a wide variety of products, but primarily think of air compressors, those large vessels. So air compressors that you could buy in Home Depot, even larger, and now we produce even larger vessels to capture methane off of landfills. Our Sierra business unit, they extrude aluminum. Think about the framing around windows and doors and siding for buildings. We also do the framework around solar panels as well. I'm not going to go into everything, but we also do hot forming of titanium. We produce copper cathodes for the mining industry, and so on and so on and so on. So it just kind of gives you an idea of the diversity of the products that we produce in this division. But again, where we didn't consume a lot of water within the service side of the business and manufacturing side, we do. So this was important for us to really kind of capture, identify, figure out, how much water are we using and what's our impacts going forward. Next slide. We being, Samuel, we do a lot of great things on the corporate social responsibility side of the business. One of the main reasons why I really enjoy working for Samuel, to be honest with you. We've linked our greenhouse gas emission reduction program to financial incentives through our sustainability linked loan. Safety really is at the core of the business, and when you consider what we produce, what we do, it can be a fairly dangerous business. But we've been able to keep our DART rate, which is our main injury indicator, at or below 1 for the past 3 years. We had our company best DART rate last year. So we truly do believe in keeping our Samuel teammates safe. We have a DEI manager. She's putting in place some great programs throughout the enterprise. And we do donate 1% of our net income to a variety of nonprofit groups. So we do a lot of things to be a good corporate steward. You can see this and a bunch of other things that we're doing in our ESG report, which is posted on our website. But if you go to the next slide. So we're always looking at how do we improve on what we're doing? How do we think outside the envelope? And for a metal company, we're doing some great things, right? But the one thing that I notice is that we don't really, we're missing one piece, and that was our water stewardship program. So when I came here to Samuel a couple of years ago, I had spoken to leadership and said, this is like one of the first things that I really wanted to put in place here was let's put in place a program to show that we are true water stewards, that we care more about the areas that we work in, and not only reducing our greenhouse gas emission, but let's also look at our water footprint and how we're impacting water quality, water stewardship, water within our fence line and outside our fence line is too. So that's why we started going after WAVE. But that discussion involved a couple different things. So if you go to the next slide. We looked at a couple different platforms, like Matt mentioned. There's a lot of different platforms out there that you can look at, put in place for your operation. For us, we looked at a few, and WAVE just made the most sense for Samuel. It really kind of fit all of our needs. We had a checklist of items that we wanted to accomplish with this project, and WAVE pretty much checked off all those boxes for us. And I'm not putting down Alliance for Water Stewardship or any of them, the great platforms. But WAVE did make the most sense for us. Next slide. And the reason why it made the most sense was really that whole enterprise-wide approach really made the most sense for me. And I'll speak to more of that here in a minute. But, also I've been working with the Water Council, and I've known Matt for many years now. And the Water Council, it's a great team to work for. Incredible. Great support. It was important for me to continue working with the Water Council going forward. I also like the third-party verification, and Lauren will talk more about that here in a little bit. But that adds an extra layer of credibility as well, and that's important going forward. I think that credibility for anything that you're working on should be paramount. And then you talk about waive the claim and seal available, right? I think when you're able to put that out on your ESG report, on your product declarations, or whatever you're doing, internally to us, I think on this webinar, we understand what that means. But I think having that claim out there, having that label out there is going to generate a lot more conversation. So people who are not in the water stewardship environment, who are not in the sandbox, will start seeing that claim and that label and say, oh, what is this? And they'll start looking into it. And hopefully that's going to, domino, and more people will start paying attention to their impact on water within their fence line and outside their fence line as well. So next slide. So let me kind of go through the lessons that we've learned throughout this process, and I'm going to touch on a couple of these things here with the enterprise-wide approach. We really kind of dug into our local watershed impacts. We really started to look at how we consume water internally in our facilities and how do we improve. So those are just some of the highlighted things that I'm going to talk to you about today. A lot of other things that we kind of learned from the process, but I'm going to focus on these here in the next 10 minutes, whatever I've got left. So next slide. So the enterprise-wide approach for us was a big advantage from other platforms. We kind of started with the big picture. When you look at a business that has 80 plus different operations across North America, we really kind of dug in and took a look at all these different operations and using the tools that are out there that are available to us, the aqueduct tools, even the tools that you'll get with Wave, really kind of help us dig down and identify which facilities we need to focus on the most. What are those critical operations that Samuel has to focus on to really be a good water steward and verify to the Wave water standard? So that enterprise approach was very important. I had put in the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard at a previous employer. Great platform, a lot of work, high cost for one facility. Being able to do that similar platform with Wave across the entire enterprise for us was really critical and added a lot of value to us. Next slide. The watershed impacts. It's important to look at what you're doing internally, right? Within the four walls of your operation, within your fence line, what's going on your property, but also looking at, outside your fence line, beyond just how do we use water, or do we have processes that are efficient water consumers internally? Are we conscious of the leaks that we may have? It's really kind of raising that awareness outside of our fence line. What's the source water quality that we're getting? What's the quality of the water that's receiving our water? Looking at the water stresses, not the scarcity. Matt talked about this earlier. Not the scarcity, but the water stress. Groundwater decline, droughts, water quality, all that. It really kind of opens your eyes to the impact that you have on the water that's flowing off of your property, whether it's flowing off your property into a tributary or whether it's water you're sending back to your POTW for treatment. And all that kind of feeds back up into your wave risk assessment, which does create a lot of internal value on water use, water consumption. Next slide. So the water consumption. I think this is probably one of the bigger things that most companies will take out of this is, the one thing that I quickly realized throughout this wave process internally was that the ops leaders at our different operations had no idea about the water consumption or the impacts that water may have from their facility. So really presenting that data collected throughout the process to local leaders, really was an eye-opening moment for them. They started having discussions on water use internally, water waste internally. How are we looking at water? Are we looking at water? Some of our operations, we're not looking at water. So they started doing, auditing water use on all the equipment that they had. It really kind of helped convey that true cost of water in our facilities and products. And I'm just so I've got a fairly a good team here at Samuel, but throughout this process, I'm going to give a shout out to the team at Fresh Coast Climate Solutions. They really did help throughout the process. For me and Samuel, when you're looking at 80 different facilities, for us, it was important to kind of look outside and get some external help. So Thanks, Raymond, Doc, and your team. Next slide. The improvements that we found that were realized throughout the WAVE process, and really being able to bring facilities together. So we have 85 different facilities. Some of these facilities have very similar equipment, very similar processes. So being able to collaborate internally and share the best practices that one facility had that could be realized in another operation with similar processes was valuable for us. And then just the need to continually improve, and the feedback we got from not only just leadership, but going out and talking to the folks on the shop floor that operate and run the equipment. That's a great resource of data, of information, of knowledge and whatnot. So if you're thinking about going through the process, make sure you engage the folks on the shop floor. They are truly valuable and have great ideas on how to make things more efficient and run more efficiently, and even reduce energy, electricity, water, which all does help your greenhouse gas emission footprint, right? And then even beyond that, that roadmap that Matt talked about earlier, that roadmap for action, it does add value. And one thing that we really did appreciate and we're grateful for going through this was just that roadmap of action items that we now have to work on. So next slide. So just kind of wrapping things up here, I just went through a whole bunch of things that to me, being responsible for this program throughout the Samuel enterprise made the most impact for us, was really help us understand our water use, right? Our water risks and how we're impacting not only internally but externally that watershed. You start looking at water runoff your property, what's outside, what can we do to minimize and mitigate those impacts off of our properties. Really helped us prioritize our water risks. Yeah, so it was pretty obvious to us. We have operations that are in water scarce areas in the southwest area of the country, but it also opened up our eyes to realize, well, what about water quality? What about the water flowing off our property? And just realizing that there's other areas besides California, Arizona, Mexico that we should be focusing on, not just water consumption, but water quality flowing off into local water streams as well. We're creating that corporate water stewardship policy that's now going to flow across the entire enterprise. And I think finally was just to communicate those efforts. We've got stakeholders asking, external stakeholders, internal stakeholders asking what we're doing to be a good corporate steward. And energy consumption, greenhouse gas emission reductions, DEI is always up there in terms of popularity. But we're starting to see external stakeholders ask about what are you doing about water stewardship. So this really kind of helps fill that box, or fill that gap, check that box for Samuel. And you'll see that in our upcoming ESG report, that we are taking this seriously, and that we're doing our best to be good corporate stewards. So with that, I think that's it for me. So I think from here, I'll pass it off to Lauren.
And just before Lauren starts, real quick, I've noticed that we have a couple questions in the Q&A, so keep submitting questions. When Lauren wraps up, we'll get to your questions. So thanks for your continued attention. Lauren, over to you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Matt. And Patrick, I'm so pleased to hear that just everything has gone super smoothly in the program. I think it's amazing to hear from obviously Matt and Stacy and the Water Council's effort. And then we get handed everything at the very end. So I'm Lauren Enright. I'm the program manager at SCS Global Services. I manage the water program here, and essentially what SCS does is we have a formal partnership with the Water Council. So any client or entity that formally goes through the WAVE program, we then go and get they get formally verified. So in terms of my own slide deck, I think the slides that are towards the end actually explain a little bit more about SCS, but I'll just jump right in and tell you a little bit about why third-party verification matters. And I believe Patrick sort of touched on it right at the very end, so it's a perfect segue for us right here. We see it from our end in just being a valued independent third party in the industry. We see clients coming to us for all different angles, and in particular for Wave, it's basically promoting their own organization in terms of their own stakeholdership, so internally, externally, as Patrick mentioned. And in essence, and I'll just go through the bullet points right here, it's providing credible audits. So what SES does well is verification, validation, and certification. And in this case, it's a verification. We essentially will go through all of the documentation that Samuel has provided and be able to coherently be able to ping back and forth with the client, whether they're missing documentation, records, in a very humble process in terms of learning and lessons along the way. So in essence, that verification where SES comes in, it's coming in multiple different angles in straight shooting where a client is wanting to go versus where they're at right now. We've seen clients with Wave being able to go ahead and show that to outside stakeholders, and like Patrick mentioned, be able to actually formally recognize that to investors and be able to say, hey, this is the credibility that goes on behind the organization. Next slide. So I think as just water stewards here on this webinar, I don't want to be reiterating anything, but in just terms of going through these specific points, it's verification is very much demonstrating what that process is in terms of any documentation being handed over to SES, and it's for usually a 30 to 45 day period. That we and my audit team be able to actually verify and read through the documentation. Secondly, this claim is worthy because it prevents itself from greenwashing. And we all know in today's age, there's many companies and organizations out there making without really any credibility behind them. So in terms of their own supply chain and value chain, we're seeing sort of a span across the board as far as where those claims are. And again, lastly, to our point about investors and actually keeping up in terms of the credibility for the own company's health and profitability, it actually is pointing that company in the right direction. So I'll give you a for instance, and Patrick again mentioned their own entity in terms of where water stewardship is and being able to sort of promote that internally. We're also seeing that the cutting edge of where companies are bringing in energy. So I've been just in the past, even 6 months, verifying companies in that intersection between water and energy. So it's already happening in how fast the progression is, which is super exciting. Next slide. So just to go through the verification process, once a client formally signs on with the Water Council, they then get introduced to my colleagues and my team and I here at SCS. We then go through more of an introductory phase in terms of proposal, and beyond that is when the client is ready to process all their documentation and their records, and they've formally gone through the implementation phase of the WAVE program. We create a share file, and the client drops everything into our share file for us to review. The conformity matrix, I think, is something that Matt may have mentioned earlier on in the call, but the conformity matrix is essentially a 5-step program, or 5 steps in which the client is looking at water usage, water consumption, water discharge, risk assessment, all of the pieces that Patrick formally presented more in an organized manner, which is fantastic to be able to see then where the client is going, where their gaps are. And again, this isn't, from an SCS point of view, this isn't like a policing and being able to check someone's homework in a really in a really, I would say, authoritative way. It's a real humble process for both SCS and the client. And the client is actually able to come back to us 2 times in order to resubmit or clarify any material just on behalf of their own entity and possibly a miscommunication or misalignment of a record or documentation. Once that process is complete, SCS then goes ahead and submits that verification to our internal team, and we're able to process that logo and formal verification to the client. So it's called our own verification package. Next slide. So just in terms of where SCS stands in our own credibility, we're not membership based. We're very much built on a premise of international, third-party, neutral, independent verification and certification and validation. And we got started back in the early 80s. Stan Rhodes started the company. Formal leader in his own right, being able to lead the company in pesticide-free material. We have grown significantly over the last 40 plus years. We have auditors, like the slide is saying, in every market, from sustainable ag, seafood, mining, water, green buildings. Next slide. And this just is a little bit more of a tailored approach, just of where we're at across our own reach. So water, and we're working on right now, is basically intertwined with, obviously we know many of these different entities right here and sectors. So where we're at and where we're going is super exciting, and SCS is super excited to be along the ride with the Water Council and being their sole verifier. Next slide. Have any questions? Perfect.
All right, thanks, Lauren, for that overview
sure.
of the verification process. And it's great to continue the partnership with SCS Global Services. I mentioned right at the top of this webinar that we, in fact, just released a 1.2 version of WAVE. We're going to be getting more information on that up on our website, but obviously worked with SCS on that revision, and just as importantly, maybe even more importantly, getting feedback from the companies that are using the program and looking for ways to improve its usability, its efficiency. So thanks again, and thanks, Patrick, for your overview. In terms of your experience to date with WAVE. We've got a couple of questions here in the chat box. Before I turn to those, one thing I did want to mention is kind of following on to Lauren's presentation, which is, how do you start your WAVE process? How do you first engage? Well, clearly feel free to reach out to us at the Water Council. You can reach out to SCS if you feel more comfortable in that regard. Eventually you'll get to me and we'll have a conversation and we'll do some scoping just in terms of the scale of your enterprise, kind of what the WAVE engagement is going to look like. That'll determine the fee to participate in the program. It's a one-time programmatic fee and program agreement that you would sign with the Water Council. And that fee includes a 1 year's membership with the Water Council. So you get that built-in value right off the bat. In terms of signing on to the program. Then we have, of course, a normative document, an implementation guide, the auditor's conformity matrix. We'll give you a full suite of documentation to get you moving through the program, to project manage the program. And then Lauren and I and our teams at SCS and the Water Council remain available throughout the entire process to answer any questions of intent, confusion, clarification, anything like that, to help you fully understand what is expected of you in terms of earning that conformity with the program. So, and then you go through the program at your own pace. And when you're ready, as Lauren mentioned, you'd reach out directly to SCS and work with them to determine the scope of that verification and the associated fee then that would be paid separately to SCS. So pretty straightforward in terms of starting the process. Again, you have all of our information after this webinar. We'll be sending around follow-up. I'm going to jump right now into the questions. Start with the easiest question first, which is, will this recording be available to view? Yes. And again, we'll be sending that around for distribution, and it'll probably live on our website somewhere as well. And you can go back and see, Stacy's nodding her head yes. So it'll be on our website, and you can go back and see this version of the webinar. We have kind of two related questions. Is WAVE applicable to any industry? And then specifically a question on agriculture. Yes, WAVE is applicable to any company in any sector located anywhere globally. It's a process-based approach to assessing that risk and use and impact across the enterprise. Right now, in terms of our mix of participating organizations, I don't think we have an agricultural organization right now. We have a couple beverage companies. We are having conversations with organizations in the ag space. So certainly applicable to that sector and to other sectors as well. As I mentioned, I was somewhat surprised when we launched the program that we also received interest right away from universities as well as utilities. And so we do actually have 2 universities in the program right now, having conversations with a third to join. So again, that process-based approach to WAVE really works, not just for any sector, but also organizations that look different and use and impact water resources differently. Patrick, I think there's a question in here for you, because I saw this point on one of your slides. You had mentioned in one of your slides somewhere this idea around the true cost or total cost of water. I don't know if you want to get into too much detail on that. I can handle this too, but the question is, how do you go about establishing that true cost of water? The question in the chat box references a basin, but you weren't talking about true cost of water in the basin. You were talking about the cost of water basically to your operations or to your organization. Could
Correct.
you just give us a little bit more color on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, you're going to get a water bill, whether it's every month or quarter. They all seem to be different, and every water bill is different. But kind of looking beyond that, the one thing that we quickly realize is that water impacts us beyond just our fence line. When you look at how the materials that we receive are dependent upon water to get those products produced, manufactured, and then to a Samuel location. And then that's the one key part that we started to realize too. We have a couple of operations that receive material via barge. So realizing pretty quickly that it's more than just the water that we rely on internally. It's how does water, whether it's a lack of water or too much water, right? Lack of water being that our suppliers don't have enough water to produce the products that we need to do that we need to manufacture products, but also if there's too much water or too little water on a few of these rivers, whatnot, we may not get those materials to make our own products. So really looking, kind of beyond just a water bill, what is the value of water to your operation and your products? And as we kind of kept going further and further down that path, we realized that there's more of a value and impact to water in our operations than just paying a water bill.
Yeah, and that's really great insight. We talk a lot about too at the Water Council, both the direct cost and the indirect costs. And then the third one, avoided costs, right? So there's multiple ways, I think, to sort of approach this idea of the true cost of water from an organization's perspective. But it really does help you end up making that business case for water stewardship if you take that thoughtful approach, which it sounds like you have, Patrick, at Samuel. So thank you for that. I had a quick question here I can answer quickly, and then Lauren, there's a question for you coming up, so be prepared. A quick question on, is it possible to download the WAVE program protocol? So we are going to be we're in the process of updating our WAVE website right now, just because we released this new version, 1.2 version of the program. We will have those 5 steps available, for people to review, for the public to review online. The implementation guide and the conformity matrix for the audit are obviously business confidential documents, but for participating organizations, once you sign on to the program, of course, we've got a whole infrastructure and architecture built around supporting your implementation of the WAVE program. Lauren, there's a question here for you on the frequency of the verification process. So you want to tell us a little bit about verification and re-verification?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So in terms of its own verification, once you go through verification, it does take about 30 to 45 days, as mentioned. Once a company goes through verification, they then about a year later, and there's a surveillance, or what we want to call an informal informational interview. And then the next year, you would go ahead and get re-verified. Between the Water Council and SCS, we have both agreed upon after two cycles of being able to go through that re-verification, you would then be able to go through what it is that I believe I'll hand this over to Matt, maybe in terms of your own larger framework that would be assessed. So, and yeah, I'll pass that maybe back over to Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, the basics are correct in terms of the verification. The initial claim is 2 years, allowing verification, for multiple times. As Lauren was indicating here, we at the Water Council had always and have always envisioned this WAVE program sitting within a suite of programs leading to ultimately the development of a water strategy at an organization. And so we're actually developing a follow-on program right now for WAVE, which will essentially be the action framework. So you kind of come out of WAVE with the risk assessment, with the roadmap, the prioritization of sites for risk and actions. This new framework that we're developing right now will then lead you down the path of setting targets, identifying stakeholders for collaborative action in those watersheds of highest stress or basins of highest stress where you're operating, as well as then some obligations around external reporting in terms of what your impact has been. So keep an eye on that. We're looking to test pilot this program this year with a launch in early 2025. So that's actually a really good segue, I think, because we're kind of running out of time here. And sorry, we did not get to all of the questions, but if I didn't answer your question, feel free to reach out directly and we can talk about that. But just again, turning to sort of a wrap up for both Lauren and Patrick, why don't you just spend a minute or two and let the audience know what's next for your organization, and if you got any news or any projects or programs in development that are relevant for our conversation today. We'll start with you, Patrick, and Lauren, I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, so that's an easy one. We're still making our way through the WAVE process. We're not verified yet, so that's the next step for us is getting through the audit and getting verified. But even before that point, like I said previously, we did learn a lot about water consumption internally, and once you get intelligent people in a facility talking about water consumption, about water use, about impacts of the water flowing off your property, you get those groups together talking and brainstorming, you get a lot of great ideas. So you're going to get through the process, you're going to find ways to reduce water consumption, you're going to find ways to be more water efficient, but just getting that conversation started, getting your ops leaders to kind of talk more about water use, water consumption, water efficiencies within their facility, to me is a winner, because they weren't focused on it before, they are now. And all that's going to lead towards, our corporate water stewardship, a program policy going forward, and it's going to be a game changer for us. So that's probably the best way that I could frame, what's next for Samuel.
Excellent. Thanks, Patrick. And again, appreciate having you here and in the program and sharing with us your insights today. Lauren, we'll let you kind of wrap things up with what's next for SCS and what's on your horizon.
Sure. So thanks again for letting me join in, Patrick. Always great to connect. via phone call, via more formal webinar. So SES just in the last year or two has been in development of our own standard, and not to segue obviously from what the WAVE and what the Water Council is doing, but I can just be able to shed some light on what our new standard is doing, and I'll sort of leave that there. We're going in for our public comment period until I believe the end of this week, and we'll then be able to launch our own standard at the end of May, early June. So I'll sort of leave it there and be able to wrap a bow, so I'm not sort of jumping in on other people's feet.
Excellent. Thanks, Lauren. And again, thanks to all of you
sure.
for attending. Thanks, Stacy, for QBing this thing. And again, we'll be following up via email with a recording of the webinar. Again, feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have any follow-up questions. Happy Earth Day, and thanks for spending a portion of your day with us.